The wind cut through Kayla like sharp knives, whipping snow into her face and making her eyes water. She stumbled over the frozen ground, her legs shaking, her body numb. Every step was agony. Her species had never been designed to endure cold. This icy wasteland was a nightmare she hadn't prepared for. The world around her was white and endless, a blank canvas of snow stretching as far as her tired eyes could see. The sky was a dull gray, blending seamlessly with the icy ground, and the wind carried a chill that made her teeth chatter uncontrollably. Kayla tried to recall how she had gotten here. She had been exploring the outskirts of her planet, far from her home settlement, collecting samples and recording data about the unusual snowstorms this region had been experiencing. Her instruments had failed hours ago, leaving her alone in the freezing wilderness with only the sound of her own labored breathing and the crunching snow under her feet. At first, she had believed she could manage. She had grown up hearing stories of explorers surviving harsh climates, but now reality was harsh. Every inch she moved felt heavier than the last. Her limbs were stiff, as if the cold itself was trying to turn her into stone. The wind howled around her and Kayla fell to her knees, the snow sticking to her frozen skin. She tried to call out for help, but the icy air made her voice barely audible, a faint rasp swallowed by the storm. Her heart pounded with fear, the panic that had been dormant finally breaking through. Her mind raced with images of her family, her friends, and everything she might never see again. Tears mixed with the snow on her cheeks, freezing almost as soon as they appeared. In that moment when her strength was nearly gone, Kayla saw a figure moving in the distance. At first she thought it was her imagination, a trick of the wind and snow. But the figure grew clearer, a silhouette against the white, moving steadily through the storm. She froze, unsure whether to call out or hide. Her instincts told her to be cautious. She had heard stories of humans visiting her planet, and while they were known to be intelligent, they were also unpredictable. But the figure seemed different. There was a calmness in his movement, a certainty that she could not explain. The human drew closer, and Kayla could see more details now. He was tall and broad, clothed in thick garments that barely seemed to protect him from the cold. His face was flushed from the freezing air, but his eyes were steady, focused. Without hesitation, he approached her, his gaze locking on hers. Kayla tried to speak, but her voice was gone, stolen by the icy wind. She could only shiver violently, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. The human stopped a few feet away. "Hey, are you okay?" His voice was strong, cutting through the roar of the storm. Kayla could barely comprehend the words, but she understood the meaning. Help. Rescue. Safety. He moved closer, carefully, as if approaching something fragile. Then, without warning, he shed part of his own clothing and wrapped it around her shivering body. The warmth hit her like a wave, shocking her senses. Kayla's species had always regarded humans as fragile, prone to injury and incapable of surviving harsh environments without advanced technology. Yet here was a human, risking his own safety in the middle of a blizzard to protect her. She tried to understand the logic, the reasoning behind his actions, but it made no sense. Humans didn't just survive. They endured, they acted, they saved. And now Kayla realized this human was showing her what courage truly meant. He lifted her carefully into his arms, holding her close against his chest. Kayla felt her body slowly thawing from the warmth of his embrace. Her fingers that had gone numb tingled as blood returned to them. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, and it gave her a strange comfort. The storm was still raging outside, but inside this human's arms she felt a moment of peace, a fragile sanctuary from the cold and fear. The human, whose name she would later learn was Daniel, began moving again, carrying her toward a distant cluster of rocks that might provide some shelter. The journey was grueling. Snow whipped against them, and each step was a battle against the wind. Daniel's determination was unwavering. He stumbled occasionally, the the snow making the ground slippery, but he never let go of Kayla. Each time he regained his balance, he whispered words of reassurance in his strange, foreign tongue, his voice calm and steady. Kayla didn't understand the language, but the tone alone was enough to soothe her frayed nerves. As they walked, Kayla's mind began to process the reality of the situation. She had always believed her species to be superior in intelligence and skill. Humans were unpredictable, sometimes reckless, but Daniel was different. He was strong, clever, and compassionate in a way she had never witnessed before. He didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate risk in the way her people did. He acted, driven by something deeper than strategy or survival instinct. It was empathy, courage, and selflessness combined into one undeniable force. The wind continued to howl, and Kayla's body still ached from the cold, but her fear was slowly replaced by awe. She had survived countless challenges before, but nothing had prepared her for this encounter. Daniel was more than a human. He was a symbol of endurance and bravery, an embodiment of the best qualities of his species. The way he held her, protected her, and moved forward without hesitation made her realize that survival wasn't just about strength or technology. It was about heart, and he had more than enough for the both of them. Finally, they reached the rocks, which formed a small natural barrier against the wind. Daniel carefully lowered Kayla to the ground, keeping her wrapped in his protective clothing. He moved around, examining the area, and found a small depression in the snow where they could take temporary refuge. It wasn't much, but it was enough to shield them from the worst of the storm. Daniel worked quickly, building a small barrier of snow and rocks to block the wind further. Kayla watched, fascinated by his resourcefulness. Humans had an uncanny ability to adapt, to use their surroundings in ways her species rarely considered. As they settled into the makeshift shelter, Kayla felt her body gradually returning to normal. Her fingers and toes regained warmth, and the shivering subsided. She looked at Daniel, who was kneeling beside her, his hands busy arranging rocks and snow. She wanted to speak to thank him, but the words felt inadequate. How could she express the depth of gratitude and awe she felt for this human who had saved her life? Instead, she simply nodded, her eyes meeting his. He smiled, a small, reassuring gesture that made her heart flutter despite the cold. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of abating. Kayla and Daniel huddled close, sharing the warmth of their combined bodies. They tried to communicate, Kayla using her own language, Daniel responding in his. It was a slow, imperfect conversation, but it was enough to build trust. Kayla learned bits of his story. He had been exploring this region, studying the unusual snow patterns, and had become separated from his team. Yet, despite the danger to himself, he had stopped to save her without hesitation. That simple act of courage and kindness struck her deeply. Night fell, and the wind grew even fiercer. The small shelter offered some protection, but the cold was relentless. Kayla leaned against Daniel, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time since being stranded, she felt hope. The warmth of his body, the strength of his presence, and the unwavering determination in his actions reassured her. She realized that survival wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about connection, trust, and the willingness of one being to risk everything for another. In the darkness, Kayla's mind wandered to thoughts of her home, of her people, and the lessons she had learned about strength and courage. She had always believed that heroism required power, strategy, and intelligence. But now she understood that true heroism was also simple, raw, and human. It was the willingness to act, to protect, to care, even when the odds were against you. Daniel embodied that heroism, and she knew she would never forget it. As the hours dragged on, Kayla and Daniel remained huddled together, sharing warmth, stories, and silent moments of understanding. The storm raged outside, but within their small shelter, a bond was forming. It was fragile, born of necessity and survival, yet it carried the potential to grow into something far greater. Kayla didn't yet know what the future held, but she knew that as long as Daniel was by her side, she had a chance to survive, and perhaps even thrive, in this unforgiving landscape. By the time the first light of dawn began to filter through the storm, Kayla felt a renewed sense of strength. Her body was no longer frozen, her mind was clearer, and her spirit was lifted. She looked at Daniel, who was already preparing to move, scanning the horizon for signs of danger or opportunity. She realized that their journey was far from over. The storm might be relentless, but together they had a chance. And in that moment, Kayla understood something profound. Survival was not just about enduring the cold or navigating the snow. It was about trust, courage, and the unexpected kindness of a human willing to risk everything for another life. She had been saved from the brink of death, not just by strength but by heart. And that realization filled her with a quiet, steady hope, a hope that would carry her through the challenges yet to come. The storm had passed, leaving the snow glistening under the pale light of the morning sun. The once blinding white world was now calm, but the chill lingered in the air. Kayla shivered slightly, not from cold anymore, but from the exhaustion that weighed down her body. She looked around the small cave where she and Daniel had taken refuge. The fire he had built the previous night still smoldered, casting flickering shadows along the walls of snow and stone. For the first time since she had been stranded, she felt something other than fear, a strange sense of safety, a sense of trust in the human who had saved her life. Daniel stirred beside her, stretching his arms and legs. "We should move soon," he said, his voice calm but filled with quiet determination. "It's not safe to stay here for long. The snow can shift and the winds could return." Kayla nodded, wrapping the human-provided blanket tightly around her shoulders. Her muscles were stiff from the night spent huddled together, but her strength was returning. She could feel life flowing through her body again, her limbs no longer icy and unresponsive. Together, they stepped out of the cave, squinting against the brightness of the snow. The landscape stretched endlessly before them, a vast expanse of white hills and frozen valleys. Daniel scanned the horizon, his eyes sharp and alert. Kayla followed his gaze, noticing details she had missed before. The subtle dips in the snow, the distant silhouette of jagged rocks, and the faint line of trees marking the approach to a forested area. It was there, she realized, that she would find her way back to her settlement. Daniel took her hand, and Kayla felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just the physical warmth from holding hands. It was the connection, the silent reassurance that she was not alone. She had never experienced anything like this. Her species valued intelligence and skill, but the human's simple gestures, his touch, and his constant presence carried a depth of meaning that she struggled to understand. As they walked, Daniel spoke, pointing out landmarks and explaining how he navigated the terrain. His language was foreign, but Kayla understood the tone and intent behind his words. She tried to respond in her own tongue, and Daniel listened patiently, repeating her sounds and attempting to mimic them. Their conversation was slow, imperfect, but it built a bridge between them. Kayla realized that communication was not just about words, it was about understanding, patience, and the willingness to connect. Hours passed, and the journey was arduous. Snow crunched under their boots, and the wind occasionally swept down from the hills, biting at their faces. Kayla stumbled once, and Daniel caught her effortlessly, holding her steady. She looked up at him, gratitude and admiration swelling in her chest. He didn't just save her life. He was carrying her through danger, guiding her safely toward home. In that moment, she understood that courage was not about avoiding risk. It was about facing it for the sake of others. As they approached the edge of the forest, Kayla noticed a faint trail in the snow. It was narrow but clearly marked by footprints, some human, some alien. She pointed to it and Daniel nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. Good. This will take us closer to your settlement, he said. Relief washed over her. She had survived the storm, survived the freezing night, and now she was almost home. But more than survival, Kayla felt a sense of awe at the human beside her. Daniel's strength, intelligence, and compassion had carried them this far. The forest was dense and quiet, the trees rising like sentinels against the sky. Snow clung to the branches, creating a delicate, sparkling canopy above them. Daniel moved carefully, scanning for hidden dangers and unstable ground. Kayla followed closely, marveling at his skill. She had always thought of humans as fragile, ill-suited for survival in harsh environments. But Daniel proved her wrong at every step. His endurance, his awareness, and his ability to adapt were extraordinary. At one point, they encountered a frozen stream, its surface slick and treacherous. Kayla hesitated, unsure how to cross. Daniel extended his hand, and she took it without thinking. He led her across, testing the ice with his weight before each step. Halfway across, a crack formed beneath them, sending a jolt of fear through Kayla. But Daniel's grip was firm, and he guided her safely to the other side. She realized then that survival was not just about strength, it was about trust. She trusted Daniel completely, and that trust kept her moving forward. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a small clearing. Daniel paused, looking around thoughtfully. "We need shelter for the day," he said. Kayla nodded, grateful for his foresight. Together, they found a fallen tree partially covered in snow, forming a natural lean-to. Daniel cleared the snow and arranged branches to provide insulation. Kayla watched, impressed by his resourcefulness. She had learned much about her species, about survival, and about humans in these few hours. But she was learning something deeper now, how selflessness and courage could change the course of a life. They rested briefly, sharing a small ration of food Daniel had carried. Kayla marveled at the simplicity of it, yet it was enough to sustain them. Daniel spoke quietly, describing his mission and why he had been exploring this region. He had come to study the snowstorms, to understand why the climate was shifting so drastically. Kayla listened, fascinated. She had never realized how humans combined curiosity, intelligence, and resilience in a way that allowed them to endure and adapt to any environment. As they continued, the forest began to thin, and distant structures came into view, buildings of Kayla's settlement, partially obscured by the snowy landscape. Her heart leapt with relief. They were close. But as she quickened her pace, she stumbled over a hidden root, falling hard onto the snow. Daniel caught her instantly, his arm steadying her. She looked up at him, feeling a surge of gratitude and something more, a deep admiration for the human who had carried her through so much. "You're safe," Daniel said, his voice calm, steady, and full of reassurance. Kayla nodded, unable to find words to express what she felt. In that moment, she realized that survival was not just about reaching safety. It was about who was beside you, guiding you, risking themselves for you. Daniel had done more than save her life. He had shown her the meaning of courage, kindness, and resilience. Finally, they reached the outskirts of her settlement. The familiar structures, the sounds of life, and the distant figures of her people brought tears to her eyes. Daniel helped her over the final snowy hill, and Kayla paused, taking in the sight. She turned to him, searching for words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel smiled, shaking his head. "No, I just did what anyone should," he replied simply. But Kayla knew it was more than that. It was extraordinary, it was human. Her people had always spoken of heroes, of brave explorers who faced dangers for the sake of others. But Kayla now understood that true heroism was not in titles or stories. It was in actions, in the quiet choices to help, protect, and endure. Daniel had risked his life in a storm that would have killed most of her kind. He had shown compassion when others might have ignored her. He had displayed strength, intelligence, and courage in equal measure. And through it all, he had remained humble, simply doing what he believed was right. As they reached the settlement gates, Kayla's family rushed forward, concern etched on their faces. She quickly explained how Daniel had saved her, using gestures and fragmented words. Her people listened in awe, unable to comprehend fully the bravery of a human who had faced the storm to protect one of their own. Kayla felt a mixture of pride and gratitude swell in her chest. She had survived because of Daniel's courage and humanity. The elders invited Daniel to rest and share his story, and Kayla stayed close, observing him. Even in the warmth of the settlement, he remained calm, attentive, and respectful. He answered questions about the storm, his mission, and his decision to save her. Kayla's people were amazed, but she was not surprised. She had witnessed his bravery firsthand. She knew the truth, that humanity, in its simplicity and determination, could accomplish the impossible. Over the following days, Kayla recovered fully, and she spent her time with Daniel, learning about his world, his people, and his ways. She taught him about her species, the history of their settlement, and the challenges of surviving in harsh climates. Together, they exchanged knowledge, skills, and stories, forming a bond that transcended language and culture. Kayla realized that this connection was rare and precious, a meeting of minds and hearts that neither species had anticipated but both needed. In the quiet moments, Kayla reflected on the storm, the endless snow, and the moments when death had seemed inevitable. She thought of the human who had appeared like a beacon in the blizzard, whose courage had turned fear into hope. She realized that survival was not just about endurance. It was about the willingness to act selflessly, to protect others, and to form connections that strengthened both spirit and body. Kayla looked at Daniel, and in her heart she understood something profound. Humans were capable of extraordinary heroism, not through power or advanced technology, but through simple, unwavering courage and compassion. Daniel had not only saved her life, he had taught her the true meaning of bravery. And as she stood there, watching the snow glisten in the morning light, Kayla felt a deep sense of hope, knowing that together, they could face any storm, any challenge, and any unknown that the universe might throw their way. The human had entered her life as a stranger, a mysterious figure in the storm. But he had become something far more significant, a friend, a protector, and a symbol of everything noble and strong in his species. Kayla knew that she would never forget him, never forget what he had done, and never forget the warmth, both physical and emotional, that had carried her through the night she thought she would not survive. And in that knowledge, she found not only gratitude but inspiration. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but it was also filled with beings capable of immense courage and kindness. Kayla had been saved by a human, yes, but more importantly, she had learned that hope, trust, and the human spirit could conquer even the coldest, deadliest storms. Together, Kayla and Daniel looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever came next. The snow had tested them, the storm had challenged them, but they had endured. And Kayla knew, without a doubt, that humanity, in its simplest and purest form, could shine brighter than any star in the sky.